Okay. So I just spent 5 minutes rambling. We're gonna start over. Apparently I need to talk about the Stephen King thing before I get into my weekly wrap up. I'm gonna put a timestamp here. If you don't want to know what's going on with Stephen King and my opinions about it, skip to this timestamp. I will try to keep it very brief, but I do need to mention it because it is something that's been on my mind all week. It has been like I keep coming back to it. I keep having discussions with people. I keep trying to figure out where I sit with that because I have a lot of feelings about what's happening and I don't know what boxes to put them in. So I just need to talk about it. I'm in my blue chambray work shirt talking about what am I going to do with my feelings about this fiasco and a little bit I don't know. Okay. So last week, I think it was last week, I have screenshots that somebody else has thankfully taken from Twitter because I am not on Twitter anymore. And I thought Stephen King wasn't as well. He had very vocally left Twitter in November and apparently he went back in February. But since I'm not on Twitter, I didn't know. And I only see the worst things as they come across Threads in context. Threads is also a bit of a hell space recently. It's been a bit of a mess. There's so much drama on Threads. It's a hellscape, but I love it. So anyway, Stephen King posted this about the Epstein Files on Twitter, okay? Odd. Very odd. People were like, what the hell is this? What are you trying to say? And then he doubled down and was like, oh, apparently I hit a nerve or whatever. Here's that tweet as well. Odd as well. Just doubled down. And then there was kind of nothing for a couple of days. And then he tweeted this, making fun of Trump, and then also saying, by the way, this isn't real, which is interesting. And I'm going to backpedal a little bit to the week prior. I had been listening to some MSNBC show. It was probably Morning Joe. Every now and then I tune in for a little clip just to see an update on something, but I don't really like them very often. Anyway, there was a reporter on that had said there is no such thing as an actual list. And yeah, of course there's not an actual list. Of course there's no list that says PDF files in my contacts and a list, right? People want the list of names in context of who is in the files. That's what they mean when they say a list. They don't mean his list. Sometimes people do mean the little black book or whatever that supposedly might exist. I don't know a whole lot about all the details. I just know that horrible people, horrible things, and why are we pretending? Why are we doing what we're doing? Anyway, I'm not going to get into it. This is not about that. This is about why the hell is he tweeting about these things? Why is he discussing it the way he's discussing it in general? If he feels the need to discuss it, why is he discussing it this way? Because it is shady as fuck and it is confusing a lot of us. There have been multiple people on TikTok throwing away all their books, people being like, oh, of course he's on the list. He made that one scene at the end of it. I'm not going to get into that scene either. I'm just not going to. So where I am struggling currently is what do I do with that? Obviously, if it comes out that he is suspected to be on that list, then that's it. The books are gone. But as of right now, I think what I am going to do until we know, there's been a lot of weird comments lately, okay? And just, I think for my own sanity, I'm not going to expect this of other people, but for me, I am not going to be platforming Stephen King anymore as an author, and I'm sitting here in my blue chambray work shirt saying that I am not going to be platforming Stephen King anymore. And it hurts a lot to say that because I grew up with his books. His books taught me empathy. His books got me into reading. I was a constant reader because of his books. There were so many in the backlist, so many things I could love, so many worlds I could get sucked into, so many characters I could sob over their deaths in the middle of the night. But I cannot keep platforming an author who says so many things in so many inappropriate ways and is of questionable integrity. I just can't. So, that being said, that was my biggest distraction last week. I did read some great books though, and I'm going to talk about them in the order of how much I loved them. So that's what we're going to do next. So if you're here for the books, now's the books. So I read Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle last week. I think I finished this in like 2 days on audio. Absolutely loved it. The audio narration was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I know a lot of people are upset about seeing TJ Klune on the list here of authors that are narrators, because there are a ton of authors that narrate a couple of lines. TJ Klune does like 2 lines in the book. He's not a major narrator. He reads off 2 or 3 lines. T. Kingfisher has a couple of lines. CJ Lead has a couple of lines. There's tons of authors that have. But the main author or the main narrator is, I cannot remember, it's this person. I will put his name up. Really well narrated. I really liked the story. I think Chuck Tingle is becoming an author that I will gravitate to all of his like kind of more mainstream. I am a little scared to pick up some of his like independent self-published stuff where he does like a short story a day. I am not big on like erotic stuff. I don't really like to read smut. It makes me uncomfortable, and I don't know if some of that is that I have learned recently that I fall on the ace spectrum, or the like upbringing that I had of the like Christian purity culture, that I get a little squeamish reading those things. But either way, I just don't necessarily always enjoy reading that type of stuff. Like, so I don't know, but I love the fact that his independent work always has something to do with what is happening in society at the moment. And that brings us to another thing that started happening on Threads last week that I was very confused about. And I can't remember if I screenshot it or not, but somebody showed up on, I do have screenshots. So this tweet showed up that was like, or it was on Threads. I call them tweets, but it was on Threads. Someone was like, what we're not going to do is cancel Chuck Tingle. And I was like, what are we doing to Chuck Tingle? What are we doing to him? I finally searched it back. It took me forever to find out what we were doing. And that was that somebody had been like, whenever I think about HP and that author, I remember that this book exists, and it is a Chuck Tingle parody. And that is all the person said. And the person whose thread I saw apparently thought that that was an attack on Chuck Tingle. And I don't think it was. I think this is a thing where context and vague tweeting makes things very weird. And this is why I get really upset about vague tweeting. Like, I love a good vague tweet on occasion, but in specific context. And this is not a context for vague tweeting. Bury Your Gaze was absolutely fantastic. Very, very much more supernatural than I expected. So we're following a screenwriter who is pretty successful. He is a gay man from Montana, but he is only out in LA. Everyone at home kind of suspects it, but he is not out at home, and it is his 20th year high school reunion. It's my 20th year high school reunion this summer, which I will not be going to. But he is about to get his show canceled because they want him to kill off the 2 main characters who he is going to have a big sapphic romance reveal with at the end of this season, and the producers want him to kill those characters, and that is the bury your gaze trope. So we actually learn a lot. We get things in context, and it is like a takedown of AI at the same time as a discussion of queer trauma in media and queer joy and how important queer joy is. And I really liked all of it. I think it was more Camp Damascus is so smart, but it feels a little campy and maybe a little younger, I think. But I honestly think that the kind of way that Chuck Tingle writes makes things feel that way. They feel very accessible while also being very intelligent, and being very multifaceted and deep layered. And I think that's really important because it's so approachable and you can take out as much out of it as you want. And I think the horror aspects were really good. It felt very it's very campy, but just the right amount of campy, for me anyway. So that was my top read of last week. Then I want to talk a little bit about Muted Volume 1. This apparently used to be a webtoon. I think it might still be available on webtoon. This is by Miranda Mundt. This was pitched to me at Emerald City Comic Con as Southern Sapphic Swamp Witches, and I said, yes, please. I will happily read that sampler, and I got an ARC from NetGalley as well. So I think this came out actually a couple weeks ago. I think I got the ARC after the book was out because I think it was a read now. I can't remember. Anyway, I think it came out recently, but it is so well written, and there's a lot of trauma in this. So this is about a young woman whose mother and sister have died, and she lives with her aunt and her cousin and was raised by them, and they are a magical family of blood witches. In this world, we have different families that have different magical elements. So we have like some fire witches and some plant witches and some blood witches, and there are others. There's like shadows and all these other ones that we kind of don't necessarily meet or get full instruction of, but the world is still building in volume 1. Our main character, Camille, ends up having a kind of a traumatic experience happen while she is trying to go through the ritual required of her around her 21st birthday. She's required to summon a demon and have a wish granted. And she's supposed to wish for a husband, and she doesn't want to. And so that kind of leads to this like kind of traumatic thing, and she ends up getting to stay with a different family friend instead of going back with her aunt, and we're kind of exploring her history as well as her present at the same time, and she's making new friendships, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was dark and cute at the same time. It was like felt a little wholesome while also being a little dark and mysterious, and I really liked the art style a lot. So I am going to be looking forward to more of this coming out. Definitely recommend it. Let's see. Was there anything else in between? Yes, there was. Okay, so while we're talking about these 2 queer books I read, let's talk about the discourse that was going around on Threads last week about whether or not romances require a happy ending, a happy ever after, an HEA. Yes, they do. I've learned this recently, not being a romance reader. I've learned this because of Threads. Threads is great sometimes for educating you on specific things. Every time this discourse comes up, I'm like, oh God, what book triggered this now? This one, I'm pretty upset about. So this was actually triggered by an author and her publisher pushing her book in which both characters commit dual suicide at the end as a form of happy ever after. Therefore, it was a romance. And look, that happens at Romeo and Juliet, but Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy, not a romance. So this book is not a romance. We will top that off with this being an MM book. So these are male characters, a Killian romantic interest with a tragedy at the end, which is the bury your gays trope. The whole idea that they have to have this big tragic ending in order to have a love story. We'll add on top of that this is written by a woman. This happens a lot, apparently. There is a great reel by Bookish Jono that I will screen record and put in here a little bit sped up because I had to go to his profile to find the name of this book. This is where I get back into the vague tweeting, okay? So everyone on Threads was talking about this book, and they're like, oh, you can't have a dual suicide, HEA, what are you talking about? Why are you writing an MM book that has this? Are we not done with this yet? Where are the men writing MM books? And I was like, what book are we talking about? We are talking about Asmodeus by Madison Devlin. She has another pen name that is Addison something, so I had to think for a second. I saw people asking in the threads that were talking about it, and they were like, what book is this? And the author of the thread was like, I'm not going to platform them, you can Google it. And then another one was like, I'm not going to platform them, you can search Threads. There's literally hundreds of posts identifying them. I searched on Threads for 15 minutes through posts and couldn't find anything, and then I got tired of that because it's hard to search on Threads, it's a pain. So I went to Google and I searched, and it took me about 20 minutes searching on Google to find someone who named the book, and that is how I came across this reel. So we'll watch the reel.
This week, ARCs went out for a book called Asmodeus by Madison Devlin. Now, that's a pen name for MM author Addison Beck. Spoiler alert, it ends with 2 queer men dying by suicide. And until yesterday, it was being marketed as a romance with an untraditional happy ending. Addison has since changed the genre label, but the damage is done. I'm tired. I am tired of watching queer men be used as props in someone else's stories about pain. There is something deeply unsettling about cisgender presenting women calling queer suicide beautiful. And that's what she said. Direct quote. I hope you can see the beauty in it. And you want to argue that you're framing it as brave and honest and necessary for the art, when really it kind of reeks of people trying to stay relevant by pushing the boundaries of what's palatable. If your story about queer men can't exist without trauma porn, then maybe you're not writing about us. You're writing about your idea of us. It's not radical to romanticize our deaths. It's not edgy or cool. It's irresponsible. Now, I don't think morality is black and white, but I do believe in justice. And justice starts with recognizing the difference between writing from within a community and writing over it. You want to provoke thought? Start by examining why you find queer suffering so poetic. Start by asking who benefits when our lives are being framed as cautionary tales. You don't owe anyone your trauma. You don't have to share your diagnosis, your identity, or your history. But if you are drawing from that well, why is the weight of your story being placed on the backs of queer men? Why aren't you writing from your own lane, using your own experience as the foundation, instead of co-opting ours as some tool to beautify what's destroying us? Gay men are 6 times more likely to attempt suicide than straight men. Between 12% and 17% of gay and bisexual men have considered it in the past year alone, and 2% have attempted it. These aren't abstract figures. They're lives. They're us. And when you write a story where 2 queer men die by suicide and call it beautiful, you're not starting a conversation, you're contributing to the crisis. The Werther effect is real. Suicide rates rise when it's romanticized or publicized without care. So when you turn it into a love story, when you frame it as haunting or poetic, you're not being brave. You're being dangerous. You're putting queer lives at risk, so you can win points for being edgy. And I'm supposed to sit here and clap for it because it's fiction? Look, I get it. It sells. It's boundary pushing. But that doesn't make it right. I know I come off as loud and aggressive about this, and I've made a lot of enemies for saying out loud what a lot of people are too afraid to admit, and it's that some of you are exploiting our community to look edgy, and then you're going to hide behind the craft when we push back. And if that makes me a villain in the MM space, so be it. At least I am not romanticizing dead queer boys to sell books.
And I think what he has to say about it is a very good thing to say. Unfortunately, I saw in his stories yesterday that him saying this has gotten him so much backlash that he's taking a break from Instagram. And we need to stop being a hellhole on the bookish internet. So those were a couple of things that were big for me last week. Lots of frustrating things. After that, I think my next favorite thing, I finished my advanced copy of The Library at Hellebore by Cassandra Khaw. This actually comes out the day that you are seeing this video. I enjoyed it. It was not my favorite of the week. It's not I think I liked The Salt Grows Heavy better. I need to read more Cassandra Khaw because maybe they are just better for me in a short format, because either I wanted more from this or I wanted less pages. But overall, I really enjoyed it. This is a very gory, violent romp through a dark library where the faculty is trying to eat the students. So this is a school or a prison where people with magical powers, people who are other dimensional beings, or that type of kind of X-Men vibes. We had X-Men vibes, okay? But dark X-Men vibes, are taken to the school. And whether they voluntarily go or are kidnapped, they go, and then they're hiding from the faculty at the end of the year, and we get these mysteries kind of unfolding. It's in first person, and I think for me, first person has to be done kind of in a very specific way for me to feel like I understand I'm a very character-driven reader. And with first person, you really get one character. And if that character is not someone that you enjoy reading about, it's very difficult to kind of connect with the other characters because you only get what that main character knows. And I think I wanted to know more about the other characters than I was getting from our POV character. And that's the only drawback for me. And that is a very specific thing. And so I just wanted more of the other characters. Some confusing things happened, but Cassandra Khaw definitely does confusing things in the way that they write. Everything feels like a fever dream. You're not quite sure exactly what's happening. And some loose ends are left, and that's just the way that they write. So I did enjoy it. It was a very good audio listen. They did this through the audio arcs on NetGalley. It's narrated by Natalie Naudis, who I really enjoy. I think the narration was done very well. Very bloody, very gory, and a examination of not necessarily academia, which I think doesn't make it dark academia for me, but more of an examination of institutions and government adjacent things, as well as how isolation affects individuals in a way. So overall, enjoyable. And then I read Alice in Wonderland. I'd never read it. I have started kind of just listening to some classics at night for a couple of hours, or I say a couple of hours. I'm listening to short classics. So I listen for about 20 minutes before I go to bed. And I've just been doing that as like my wind down routine. I started playing Animal Crossing and just listening to 20 minutes of an audiobook while I do some stuff on my island to just kind of like relax. Okay. Alice in Wonderland was not necessarily what I expected. I love the Disney movie. I grew up on the Disney animated one. I grew up on that shit. I loved it. I loved how weird it was. And then when the live action one directed by Tim Burton came out, I loved Tim Burton a lot. And so I watched all of his movies and I watched that movie when I didn't have cable and I was a broke student. I would put it on while I was cooking dinner and I watched that movie, alternating that with Chicago every night for about 6 months until I could afford cable. And I've watched that movie so many times. I really appreciate that movie. I think the interpretations of Alice in Wonderland. Oh, the dark one called Alice by Christina Henry. I like that one too, and the sequel to that. I like those interpretations. I think the interpretations of Alice in Wonderland are better for me than the original story. I know that the original story is a commentary on society and the expectations to be productive, and that's why a lot of the like little poems that Alice is supposed to recite in the book get twisted up because they take the productivity thing away. So we have the busy bee turns into the alligator. I can't remember what article I read like 15 years ago on this, but each thing is supposed to be doing a point, but it's very fever dreamy and it's not very cohesive. And I think the lack of cohesion kind of threw me off. Each scene needs to be read as a vignette. And I think if I wasn't listening to it, I might have been able to pick that up easier. It wasn't enjoyable to listen though, because it's read by Scarlett Johansson, and she does some amazing voices. Like her voice acting for different voices for characters is so good. It was just enjoyable to listen to her. But the story itself was not necessarily what I was really hoping it would be. So that's where I am with that. I am currently listening to two things. Well, kind of listening. So Fool's Errand. All right, I've started it. It is upstairs. I didn't bring it down with me. I've started Fool's Errand finally. Very excited to have started it. Very much feeling that kind of anxiety but every time I pick it up. So I've been going very slow on it. I'm not as far as I would like to be. So what I did was I picked it up on audio as well as I have the physical book. And so every now and then I'm reading physically. And then when I'm busy and feel like I can listen to it, I pick it up on audio. So I am currently like 23% in. I think I just finished chapter 8, or no, I'm just about to start chapter 8. I can't say anything about it without spoiling. So I've been debating doing a spoiler video because it will spoil the previous books. So I've been debating doing a video just about it and about my thoughts as we go. But we'll see how I feel about that. I am also listening to, in my continuation with the classics, A Christmas Carol, narrated by Tim Curry. That's the only reason I picked it up, because I was like, it's July. Narrated by Tim Curry. And I love me some Tim Curry. So I'm enjoying listening to that. Again, very different than the movies that I am familiar with. I think it was like it's the one with Scrooge McDuck that I am most familiar with, that one. And yeah, so I'm enjoying it overall. But again, it's Tim Curry that's making me enjoy it. So those are the books that I'm at. The next thing I'm going to pick up is I do have the second book in the Chorus of Dragons series on Libby, ready to go as soon as I finish or need to take a break from the audio for Fool's Errand. And then I also have today my hold for Mira Grant's Overgrowth came through. So I'm hoping I can get to that before I gotta return it. I leave for Scotland in 2 weeks. I leave in 2 weeks. So I've been doing some prep to get ready to go. I need to make like a shrug, shawl, bolero jacket, something to go over my dress for the wedding that I'm going to, and trying to get everything prepared and ready since my dog's going to be spending 2 weeks with my parents while I'm gone, trying to get his stuff situated, his food prepped and ready to go. And so we're just kind of, I've got to make a poster for a conference that my boss is going to take to the conference with him, because I am in Scotland while the conference is happening in Texas. So he's taking the poster. So I'm trying to finish that up. So I'm like busy with work, busy with life, trying to get ready to go. And I just like, a lot of things are happening. So, that's where I'm at. I will see you soon with something else.